9 months pregnant, she walked 40 miles in snow. The rancher asked, "Where's your husband?" The cold wind cut sharply through the trees, making the small cabin shiver as if it were alive. Inside, a young woman sat on a wooden chair near the fireplace, her hands pressed against her large 9-month pregnant belly. Her name was Clara. The fire crackled, but it barely warmed the room. The snow outside had been falling for days, piling high against the windows, turning the world into a silent, white wilderness. Clara stared out, her eyes tracking the snowflakes as they danced in the wind. Her heart was heavy, and her mind was racing. She knew she could not stay in the cabin much longer. Clara's husband Daniel had gone to a nearby town weeks ago to handle some urgent work on the family's ranch. He had promised to return in a few days, but those days had stretched into weeks, and with each passing day, Clara had begun to worry more. The food in the cabin was running low. The firewood she had stacked barely lasted a day, and the thought of being trapped in the cabin without help made her stomach churn. She could not rely on Daniel to return any time soon, and she could not afford to wait for him. She needed to act. The thought of leaving the cabin terrified her, yet she knew it was her only option. She stood up, her back aching from the pregnancy, and slowly began packing what little she could carry. A small backpack held a few essentials: a loaf of bread, some dried fruit, a flask of water, and a thick blanket. She wrapped herself in her heaviest coat, pulling the hood tight around her face. The snow had stopped falling for the moment, but the sky was dark and heavy with clouds, promising more snow soon. Clara took a deep breath, trying to calm the fear building inside her. Her legs trembled as she tightened the straps of the backpack. She glanced at the wooden floorboards of the cabin, as if saying goodbye to the place that had been her home for so long. With a final glance around the small room, Clara stepped outside. The cold hit her immediately, sharper than anything she had imagined. Her boots sank into the thick snow with each step, making a soft crunching sound that echoed through the empty woods. The wind tugged at her coat and her hood, trying to push her back to the warmth of the cabin, but she pressed forward. Every step was a struggle. Her legs were heavy, her belly pulling at her center, and the snow seemed to grow deeper the farther she walked. She had not gone far when she realized how silent the forest had become. The usual sounds of birds and rustling leaves were gone, replaced by the wind and the soft, constant crunch of her boots in the snow. Clara had calculated the distance she needed to travel. The nearest ranch was more than 40 miles away, a long and dangerous journey even for someone healthy and strong. For her, 9 months pregnant and alone in the snow, it was almost unimaginable. But she had no choice. If she stayed in the cabin, she risked running out of food, losing warmth, or facing labor without any help. The ranch was her only hope. She pressed her hands against her belly, feeling the small movements of her baby inside. "We can do this," she whispered softly, more to herself than anyone else. The baby's movements gave her strength, reminding her that she was not alone in this journey. The first few miles were the hardest. Her legs ached, her back screamed with each step, and the cold seeped into her bones. Her breath came in clouds, freezing in the air before it could disappear. At one point she stumbled, her foot sliding on a hidden patch of ice. She fell to her knees, snow melting into her gloves. For a moment, she sat there, catching her breath, feeling tears sting her eyes. But then she remembered the reason she was doing this, the tiny life depending on her. She pushed herself up, shaking off the snow, and kept moving. Hours passed, though it felt like days. The snow had begun falling again, softly at first, then thicker, making it harder to see the path ahead. Clara's vision blurred, her hands numb, but she refused to stop. She remembered the survival tips Daniel had taught her over the years. Move steadily, do not rush. Keep your body warm. She focused on each step, one at a time, her mind repeating a mantra of strength and perseverance. Each mile felt longer than the last. She counted steps to keep herself focused, counting hundreds over and over until her mind became a rhythm of movement. The forest was not kind to travelers. Fallen branches blocked the narrow path, and sometimes she had to crawl over logs or squeeze between trees. She found a small stream frozen over, but she managed to scoop a little water from the edge, drinking slowly to conserve energy. She ate the dried fruit from her bag in tiny bites, knowing it would not last long. Her stomach growled despite the food, but she pushed the hunger aside, focusing only on moving forward. At night, she would find a small spot under a pine tree to rest, covering herself with her blanket. The cold made sleep nearly impossible, and she woke often, shivering uncontrollably. The loneliness was another challenge. No sound except the wind and her own labored breathing. She missed human voices, the comfort of a familiar face. She whispered to herself, talking softly as if to the baby, giving it stories and encouragement. "We are strong," she said, brushing snow from her coat. "We will get there. We will see Daniel soon." Each word was a lifeline, a way to keep her mind from giving in to fear. She thought of her home, the small garden, the animals, the simple life she was leaving behind. Everything familiar now seemed like a distant memory, and yet it motivated her to reach safety. The terrain grew more treacherous as she progressed. Hills rose steeply ahead, and Clara had to climb slowly, her body straining with every step. Her boots slipped, her hands raw from gripping snow-covered branches for support. At times, she felt dizziness and fatigue pressing on her. Her back ached unbearably. Her legs felt like lead, but she refused to rest for long. Each time she stumbled, she reminded herself of the baby inside her, the life she had to protect. Giving up was not an option. By the end of the second day, the journey had taken a toll on her. Her face was pale, her lips cracked, and her eyes heavy with exhaustion. Yet something inside her kept moving forward, a stubborn, determined flame that would not die. The snowstorm had worsened, visibility dropping to just a few feet ahead. Clara slowed her pace, listening for any sound, any sign of life. The forest seemed endless, and her spirit began to falter. But then, in the distance, she thought she saw a faint light, a glow against the darkness of the snow-covered trees. Her heart leapt. Could it be a cabin, a ranch, someone who could help? She pushed herself harder, ignoring the pain in her knees and back. Each step felt like climbing a mountain, but she moved steadily toward the light. Thoughts raced in her mind. What if no one is home? What if the storm gets worse? What if something happens to the baby? But she refused to think of failure. Her focus was on survival, on reaching help. Every small movement was a victory. Every breath was a reminder that she was still alive and still moving toward hope. By the third day, the snow had become nearly waist-deep in some areas. Clara had developed blisters on her feet and frostbite beginning to creep into her fingers. Her clothes were wet from snow melting against her body. She trudged forward, guided only by memory and determination, using the small compass Daniel had given her. She thought of the ranch as a beacon, a place of warmth, food, and safety. She imagined the fire crackling, a kind voice greeting her, and a hot drink warming her hands. The vision pushed her onward, step by painful step. At times, Clara stopped and leaned on a tree, closing her eyes for a few seconds to regain strength. She whispered to her baby, promising safety, promising love, promising that they would survive this ordeal. She thought of her husband and what he would say if he could see her now. She hoped he would be proud, even if he could not understand why she had to do this alone. The thought of family, of warmth and love waiting at the end of this journey, kept her moving even when her body begged for rest. By late afternoon on the third day, Clara's strength was waning, but her determination never faltered. The snow had stopped falling for the moment, revealing a path that looked familiar from the stories Daniel had told her about the ranch. Her heart lifted, and she found a small burst of energy to continue. Every step was still agonizing, but hope was growing stronger than the pain. She whispered to the baby again, feeling a flutter of movement in return, as if the child was encouraging her to keep going. Exhausted, cold, and aching, Clara pushed herself forward. The journey had been terrifying, but she had survived. She had proven to herself that courage could come from the most unexpected places, that strength was not only in the body but in the heart and mind. The thought of reaching the ranch, of finally finding safety and warmth, was almost enough to bring tears to her eyes. Her lips cracked in a small smile. She knew the hardest part of her journey was not yet over, but she had made it farther than she ever imagined possible. Clara adjusted the straps of her backpack one last time and took a deep breath. The light from the distant ranch grew brighter, promising safety, help, and a chance to rest. Every ache, every step, every fear led to this moment. She lifted her head high, ignoring the pain, and continued forward, ready to face whatever came next. Clara's eyes strained against the blinding snow, now falling steadily again. The distant light of the ranch, which had seemed so close, now looked like a fragile glow swallowed by the white world around her. Every step forward felt heavier than the last. Her legs shook with exhaustion, and her belly pressed against her coat, making balance almost impossible. Her boots were soaked, and her socks rubbed painfully against her raw skin. The snow, which had at first seemed like soft white fluff, had turned into a relentless enemy. It filled her shoes, clung to her gloves, and weighed down her coat until it felt like she was carrying a mountain on her back. Clara paused for a moment. Leaning on a sturdy pine tree, she let the snow settle on her shoulders and closed her eyes. The cold wind cut across her face, numbing her cheeks and nose. She could feel the sharp sting of frost starting to form on her fingers despite her gloves. Her lips trembled, chapped and pale, as she whispered softly to herself,
"Keep moving, just a little further, for the baby."
The soft flutter inside her belly seemed to answer, as though the child was urging her onward. That small reminder, that life she carried within, renewed her determination to survive. She knew she could not stop for long. If she stayed still, the cold could overcome her. She pressed on, each step sinking deep into the snow. At times the snow reached her knees, forcing her to lift her legs higher with each step. Clara's arms grew tired from holding her coat closed against the wind, and her shoulders ached from the weight of her backpack. Even the simple act of breathing was difficult, as the icy air burned her lungs. But she forced herself to take each breath slowly, focusing on the rhythm, trying not to panic. The forest around her was both beautiful and cruel. Snow-laden branches hung low, brushing her face as she walked, and she occasionally had to duck or push them aside. The trees, heavy with frost, groaned as if under great pressure, and the occasional crack of a breaking branch made her jump. Clara's eyes scanned the area constantly, wary of hidden dangers. She knew that animals searching for food could be near, and she did not want to encounter anything in her vulnerable state. Yet despite the fear, she also felt a strange admiration for the silent forest, for the quiet beauty of snow covering everything like a soft white blanket. By midday, hunger gnawed at her. The small pieces of bread she had packed were gone, and the dried fruit was nearly finished. She sat on a fallen log, shivering, and ate what little remained. The effort of walking made her extremely thirsty, and she had to melt snow in her flask to have water. Each sip was icy cold, but it gave her enough energy to continue. Her mind wandered to Daniel, wondering why he had taken so long, and if he realized she had to make this journey alone. She missed him terribly, but she knew he was not coming back in time. This was something she had to face herself. The hours passed slowly, each step feeling like a mile. The wind picked up, blowing snow into her face and making it difficult to see. She pulled her hood tighter and squinted, trying to keep her balance on the uneven, icy ground. Her body ached in ways she had never imagined. Her back throbbed, her legs were stiff and trembling, and her feet burned from the cold. She stumbled several times, her gloves scraping against the rough bark of trees as she tried to steady herself. At one point, she fell forward into the snow, and her heart raced as panic set in. She lay there for a moment, catching her breath, feeling the cold seep through her coat, but then forced herself up. Giving up was not an option. Night approached faster than she expected. The sky darkened, the snow falling heavier, and the cold becoming sharper. Clara's energy was almost gone, and she had to dig deep into her determination to keep going. She remembered a small clearing ahead that Daniel had described once, a place where travelers could rest and perhaps see a faint light from the ranch. That memory became her focus. She imagined reaching it, feeling warmth, eating a proper meal, and resting her tired body. She visualized the fire, the rancher's friendly voice, and the comfort of being safe. That vision kept her moving through the darkness, each step forward a triumph over exhaustion. Along the way, Clara faced the treacherous parts of the forest. Ice patches made her feet slide unexpectedly, and she had to stop herself from falling more than once. She had to carefully maneuver around fallen trees and thick branches, which seemed to appear wherever she looked. Once, she nearly stepped into a shallow stream hidden beneath the snow. The water was freezing, and falling in could have been disastrous. Her heart raced as she carefully backed away, taking a different path. Every small obstacle tested her, and she grew more cautious, yet determined not to be slowed down. By the second night, Clara's body was beginning to feel the effects of her extreme journey. Her feet were blistered, her hands and fingers numb, and the cold had penetrated her coat to reach her core. Her breaths came in short, painful gasps, and every movement required immense effort. She stopped under a thick pine tree, creating a small shelter from the wind. She wrapped herself tightly in her blanket and tried to rest. Sleep was difficult. Every few minutes, she shivered uncontrollably, and the thought of stopping permanently entered her mind. But she pushed it away, whispering to her child, telling it they would make it together. Even as her body weakened, Clara's mind refused to give in. She thought constantly of the ranch, of the people she might find there, and of the safety that awaited. Her determination grew stronger than her fear. She remembered all the survival lessons Daniel had taught her. Keep moving, stay calm, ration food, and never let yourself despair. Each memory became a lifeline, guiding her through the snow, giving her strength when her body begged her to collapse. On the third day, the snowstorm worsened. Visibility dropped to just a few feet, and the world seemed to close in on her. Clara could barely see the path ahead, yet she pressed on, feeling along the ground with her boots, marking small landmarks in the snow to avoid going in circles. She stumbled many times, her hands scraping against the rough bark of trees, her face red and swollen from the cold. Every step required a battle between mind and body. Fatigue threatened to overwhelm her, but she kept repeating her mantra, one step at a time, for the baby, for survival. Despite the worsening conditions, Clara also found moments of small victories. She discovered a small frozen stream she could scoop water from, giving her the hydration she desperately needed. She managed to find a few pine cones to use as kindling in case she needed to make a fire. Every minor success lifted her spirits slightly, giving her the strength to continue. She realized that even in the harshest conditions, there were ways to survive if she remained alert and persistent. Clara's thoughts often wandered to the baby. She imagined holding her child in her arms, safe and warm, far from the snow and the wind. The baby's tiny movements inside her were both comforting and motivating. She whispered softly, talking to it as if it could understand. "We will be safe soon. Just a little further. Keep moving." The gentle flutter inside her belly felt like a small hand encouraging her onward. Those moments gave her hope, reminding her why she could not give up no matter how difficult the journey became. The terrain grew increasingly difficult. They had to climb steep slopes covered in ice, navigate around fallen trees, and sometimes wade through deep snowdrifts that seemed never-ending. Her body screamed in protest, her muscles burning and joints aching. But she refused to rest for long. Each pause and movement risked her losing too much body heat. She forced herself to keep moving, even when her steps felt impossible. Her resolve was stronger than the physical pain, and that determination carried her forward. By the fourth day, Clara could see faint signs of the ranch's structures in the distance. The vision gave her a burst of energy, even though her body was nearly exhausted. The snow had stopped briefly, and she could see the dim outline of buildings through the trees. Her heart leapt with hope. She knew that if she could just make it a little further, she would find shelter, warmth, and people who could help her. Every aching step was a step closer to safety. As she neared the ranch, Clara's mind was filled with gratitude for the small victories that had kept her alive. The water she had found, the moments of rest under trees, and the constant determination to keep moving. The journey had tested every ounce of her strength, but she had survived. She had proven to herself that courage and determination could overcome even the harshest conditions. Clara's steps became lighter as the ranch drew closer. She could almost feel the warmth through the thick snow and icy air. Her body ached, her fingers were numb, and her legs were stiff, but hope gave her strength. She whispered softly to the baby, promising safety and love, promising that the nightmare of the journey was almost over. The vision of the ranch, with its welcoming lights and potential help, spurred her forward. She would not stop now. Clara's eyes widened as she saw the first clear shapes of the ranch buildings through the snowy haze. After 4 grueling days of trudging through waist-deep snow, slipping on ice and struggling with exhaustion, the sight filled her with an overwhelming sense of hope. The dim glow of lights from the window seemed almost magical, a beacon in the cold, frozen wilderness. Her legs trembled from both fatigue and excitement as she forced herself to keep moving. Every aching muscle in her body reminded her of the distance she had traveled, the obstacles she had overcome, and the sheer determination it had taken to survive. Yet the warmth and safety she imagined awaiting her gave her the final push she needed. The path to the ranch was narrow and covered with freshly fallen snow. Clara had to step carefully to avoid hidden ice patches or deep snowdrifts. The sounds of her boots crunching on the snow echoed loudly in the quiet night. She paused occasionally to catch her breath, leaning on nearby trees for support. Her hands were raw from gripping the straps of her backpack, her fingers stiff and numb. Her back ached with every movement, and her swollen ankles protested with each step. Yet she pressed forward, whispering softly to her unborn child, "Almost there. Just a little more. We're going to be safe soon." As she approached the main ranch building, a sudden gust of wind nearly knocked her over. She stumbled but caught herself on the wooden fence that surrounded the property. Snowflakes swirled around her face, blinding her for a moment. Her chest heaved as she tried to calm her racing heart. The warm glow of the windows now seemed so close, yet it took what felt like forever to cover the last few steps. She paused to catch her breath again, pressing both hands to her belly. The baby kicked softly, a reminder that she was not alone in this struggle. The tiny life inside her was the driving force behind every painful, exhausting step. Finally, Clara reached the front of the ranch house. The porch was covered in snow, but it appeared that someone had been tending to it recently. Footprints in the snow led to the door, and smoke rose from the chimney, curling into the dark night sky. Clara's heart leapt with relief. She raised her arm and knocked weakly on the heavy wooden door, the sound echoing faintly in the still night. Moments passed, and then the door creaked open. A man appeared in the doorway, tall and strong, with a look of surprise etched across his face. Who are you?" he asked, squinting against the wind and snow. His voice carried concern as he noticed Clara's disheveled appearance. Snow clung to her coat, her hair was matted, and her face was pale and streaked with tears and frost. But it was her swollen belly that caught his attention immediately. "Where's your husband?" he asked, his tone a mix of disbelief and worry. Clara swallowed hard, her voice barely audible from exhaustion. He's not here." I had to come myself," she managed to say. Her words were fragmented, but her eyes conveyed the urgency and fear she had endured for days. The rancher's eyes widened further as he took in the magnitude of her journey. You walked here, alone?" he asked, disbelief heavy in his tone. Clara nodded weakly, her legs trembling as she leaned against the doorframe for support. The rancher's expression softened immediately. "Come inside," he said firmly. "You can't stay out here another second." He stepped aside and helped Clara over the threshold, his hand steadying her as she stumbled into the warmth of the house. The heat hit her like a wave, melting some of the frost clinging to her clothes. She sank to the floor briefly, exhausted beyond words, as the rancher wrapped a thick wool blanket around her shoulders. "You're safe now," he said gently, his voice reassuring. "You made it." The ranch interior was cozy and warm, a stark contrast to the frozen wilderness outside. A fire crackled in the hearth, sending orange light dancing across the wooden walls. The rancher led Clara to a comfortable chair near the fire. "Sit down. You need to rest," he instructed. Clara sank into the chair, feeling the heat seep into her cold, aching body. The blanket around her shoulders was heavy, soft, and comforting. For the first time in days, she felt a moment of peace. The journey had been grueling, terrifying, and exhausting, but now she was safe. The rancher, whose name was Thomas, moved quickly to prepare something for her to eat. He brought a cup of warm broth and a slice of bread. Clara took it slowly, her hand shaking as she brought the food to her lips. The warmth of the broth and the taste of the bread filled her with a sense of normalcy she had not felt in days. She sipped the broth carefully, feeling strength return to her body, little by little. Every bite reminded her that she had survived the impossible and that her determination had carried her through. Thomas sat across from her, his eyes never leaving her face. "You're very brave," he said quietly. "Most people wouldn't make it this far in the conditions outside, let alone someone carrying a child. You're remarkable." Clara's lips trembled, and tears filled her eyes. She shook her head, overwhelmed by the combination of relief, exhaustion, and the kindness of a stranger who had no reason to help her but chose to do so anyway. She whispered softly, "I had no choice. I had to make it for the baby." Thomas nodded solemnly. "I understand," he said. "You did what you had to do. But now you must rest. You've been through more than anyone should face alone." He reached for a warm blanket to cover her legs and adjusted her position to make her more comfortable. Clara closed her eyes briefly, feeling the warmth, the safety, and the relief washing over her. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to breathe fully, without the constant weight of fear pressing on her chest. As she rested, Clara told Thomas the story of her journey. Every detail poured out. The deep snow, the freezing winds, the blisters on her feet, the exhaustion that threatened to collapse her at every step. She spoke of the small victories, finding water, navigating treacherous terrain, and the moments when the baby's movements reminded her to keep going. Thomas listened quietly, occasionally nodding, his eyes filled with concern and admiration. Every word she spoke reminded him of the incredible courage she had shown. Hours passed as Clara slowly regained some strength. She sat near the fire, sipping broth and nibbling on bread, while Thomas prepared a small room for her to rest properly. He brought a warm bed, fresh blankets, and a pillow, ensuring she would have a safe and comfortable place to sleep. Clara sank into the bed, feeling every aching muscle relax slightly in the warmth. The exhaustion of the last 4 days hit her suddenly, and she closed her eyes, letting the comfort of the room envelop her. Even as she rested, Clara could not stop thinking about the journey she had survived. She remembered the dark forests, the treacherous ice, the biting cold, and the moments when she thought she could not go on. Each memory was painful, yet also a testament to her strength and determination. She realized that she had endured more than she ever imagined possible. She had fought for herself and for her unborn child, proving that courage often comes from the most desperate circumstances. That night, Clara slept deeply for the first time in days. The warmth of the ranch, the safety of the room, and the kindness of Thomas created a sense of security she had not felt in a long time. She dreamed of the journey, the snow, and the baby kicking softly inside her. In her dreams, she imagined reaching the ranch sooner, of seeing the welcoming lights sooner, and of finally being safe in the arms of someone who cared. When she woke, she felt slightly stronger, still exhausted but with a renewed sense of hope. The following morning, Clara awoke to the smell of fresh bread and coffee. Thomas had prepared a hearty breakfast for her, ensuring she had energy to regain her strength fully. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, feeling the warmth and nourishment fill her body. Every sip, every mouthful reminded her that she had made it through the worst and that her determination had carried her to safety. She looked out the window and saw the snow-covered landscape, now peaceful in the early morning light. The ranch stood as a fortress of warmth and hope amidst the harsh winter wilderness. Thomas came to check on her, concern still evident in his eyes. "How are you feeling?" he asked gently. Clara smiled faintly, a mixture of gratitude and lingering exhaustion on her face. "A little better," she said softly. "Thanks to you." Thomas shook his head, smiling kindly. "No, it's your courage that brought you here. I just made sure you had a safe place to rest. You did all the hard work." Clara nodded, realizing the truth in his words. The journey had been hers to make, and the obstacles, pain, and fear had been hers to overcome. Thomas had only provided the shelter and warmth that allowed her to recover. The realization filled her with both pride and humility. She had faced nature's worst and survived. The baby she carried had survived. And now, with the help of a kind stranger, she could finally begin to heal from the ordeal she had endured. Hours later, Thomas arranged for a checkup with a local doctor who came to the ranch to ensure Clara and her baby were safe. The doctor examined her carefully, smiling warmly. "You've been through a lot," he said, "but both you and your baby are doing well. You are very lucky and very strong." Clara felt tears welling in her eyes. Every word, every smile, every moment of care reminded her that she had survived an extraordinary journey. She whispered a quiet thank you to the baby inside her, feeling its tiny movements as if in reply. The morning sun spilled gently through the windows of the ranch, casting warm golden light across the wooden floors. Clara lay in the soft bed Thomas had prepared for her, feeling a sense of comfort she had not known in days. The snow outside glimmered, soft and untouched, a stark contrast to the brutal storm she had endured. Her body still ached from the long journey, every muscle protesting, but the warmth of the room and the gentle care she had received made the pain more bearable. For the first time since leaving her cabin, she allowed herself to breathe fully and feel the safety surrounding her. Clara watched the small movements of the baby inside her belly and smiled faintly. She could feel the child stretching, shifting, and nudging, reminding her of the life she had fought so hard to protect. The journey had been grueling, but every step had been worth it. She whispered softly, "We made it. We're safe now." It felt strange to speak so quietly, to let herself relax without fear. The ranch had become a sanctuary, a place where exhaustion could finally be replaced with rest, where fear could be replaced with hope, and where the kindness of a stranger had turned a dangerous journey into a story of survival. Thomas entered the room carrying a tray with a warm breakfast and a steaming cup of tea. His expression was calm, steady, and comforting. "Good morning," he said, setting the tray on a small table next to her bed. "You slept well?" Clara shook her head slightly, smiling faintly. "Better than I have in days," she admitted, her voice soft but filled with gratitude. She reached for the cup of tea, holding it between her cold hands and savoring the warmth it provided. Every sip felt like nourishment for more than just her body. It warmed her spirit, too. As she ate, Clara reflected on her journey. She remembered the biting winds, the endless snow, and the moments when it seemed impossible to take another step. She remembered falling repeatedly, the numbness in her fingers, the blisters on her feet, and the exhaustion that weighed her down like a heavy stone. She remembered the fear that had threatened to paralyze her mind and the desperation that pushed her forward. And most of all, she remembered the tiny life she carried, whose gentle movements had been both her motivation and her companion in the lonely wilderness. Her thoughts shifted to Daniel, her husband, who had been away when she had set out on this journey. She wondered what he would say if he knew the lengths she had gone to survive. Would he be proud? Shocked? Terrified? The uncertainty made her heart ache, but she also realized that the journey had given her a strength she did not know she possessed. She had faced the raw power of nature alone, relying on her courage, her endurance, and the bond with her unborn child. That bond had been a source of unyielding strength, and she knew it would continue to guide her in the days ahead. After breakfast, Thomas suggested she take a short walk outside to stretch her legs, knowing she had been immobile for much of the past few days. Clara agreed cautiously, wrapping herself in a thick coat and woolen scarf. Stepping onto the porch, she felt the crisp morning air, still cold but gentler than the storm that had nearly consumed her. The snow sparkled under the sunlight, and the silence was no longer intimidating. Instead, it felt peaceful, almost welcoming. She walked slowly, taking each step carefully, feeling the ground beneath her feet and appreciating the simple act of movement without struggle. The ranch itself was quiet but alive. Chickens clucked softly in the yard, and the distant sound of horses shifting in their stables provided a comforting background. Clara watched the small movements, feeling a connection to life outside the harsh wilderness she had left behind. She marveled at how simple things, the warmth of the sun, the gentle rustle of leaves, the sound of animals, could bring such comfort after days of terror and struggle. Each moment outside reinforced her sense of safety and reminded her that the world could be gentle, even after proving itself cruel. As the day passed, Clara began to regain some strength. Thomas checked on her regularly, bringing water, blankets, and anything else she needed. They spoke softly about the ranch, the winter storms, and survival in these remote areas. Clara shared some of her experiences, recounting moments of struggle and the small victories that had kept her moving. Thomas listened with admiration, sometimes shaking his head in disbelief at her courage. "You truly are remarkable," he said quietly. "Most people would not survive what you did, especially carrying a child. You've shown incredible strength." Clara smiled faintly, humbled by his words, but she knew that the real strength had come from within, from the need to protect her baby and herself. Later that afternoon, the local doctor arrived for a follow-up check. Clara had grown stronger, but the journey had left her body weakened and in need of careful monitoring. The doctor examined her thoroughly, checking both her health and the baby's. "You've been through a tremendous ordeal," he said kindly. "But you're recovering well and your baby is strong. You should rest and continue to take care of yourself." Clara felt a wave of relief wash over her. The reassurance was like a balm on her frayed nerves, a confirmation that the struggle had not caused irreparable harm. She whispered a soft "thank you" to the baby inside her, feeling a gentle kick in response as if the child understood. That evening, Clara sat near the fire wrapped in a blanket, reflecting on the journey. She thought about the days she had spent walking alone through snow and ice, each step a battle against nature and her own fatigue. She thought about the moments when fear had threatened to take over, when the cold had seemed unbearable, and when her body had cried out for rest she could not afford. And she thought about the baby whose quiet presence had been a constant source of strength, a reminder that she was never truly alone. Clara realized that the journey had changed her in ways she could not yet fully comprehend. It had tested her in ways she never imagined, but it had also shown her what she was capable of enduring. She felt a sense of pride mingled with gratitude, for the strength she had discovered within herself and for the kindness of Thomas the rancher, who had provided safety and comfort when she needed it most. She understood that courage was not only about facing danger, but also about making decisions in the face of uncertainty and acting despite fear. Over the next few days, Clara regained more strength. She moved around the ranch more confidently, helping with small tasks and interacting with the animals. Every movement felt easier, and she began to enjoy the simple pleasures she had missed during her journey. Warmth, food, and safety, things so basic yet so precious, became treasures she could appreciate fully. She spoke with Thomas about the journey, sharing details she had not yet told anyone, and he listened with steady attention, offering encouragement and support. Clara also began to plan for the return home. She knew that the journey back would be difficult, but she felt prepared now, having recovered enough to make the trip safely. She thought carefully about the route, the supplies she would need, and how to pace herself. This time, however, she felt confident, knowing that her body and mind were stronger after surviving the previous ordeal. She also felt reassured by the kindness of strangers and the reminder that help could be found even in the most remote places. As the days passed, Clara felt a growing sense of connection to the ranch and its surroundings. She admired the resilience of the land, the quiet strength of Thomas, and the simple, dependable rhythm of life in this remote place. She realized that her journey had taught her not only about survival but also about the importance of human connection, compassion, and the courage found in both herself and others. The experience had been terrifying, exhausting, and painful, yet it had also revealed beauty, hope, and resilience she had not known existed. Eventually, the day came for Clara to leave the ranch. She packed her belongings carefully, feeling stronger and more prepared than when she had arrived. Thomas walked with her to the edge of the property, ensuring she had everything she needed for the journey home. He looked at her with a mix of admiration and concern. "You've done incredibly well," he said quietly. "Remember to take it slow and stay safe. You've survived something few could endure." Clara smiled, feeling gratitude and a quiet sense of accomplishment. "Thank you," she said softly. "I couldn't have made it without your help." As Clara set out for the journey back to her cabin, she felt a renewed sense of strength and determination. The snow-covered path no longer seemed as daunting. She had faced the harshest elements, battled exhaustion and fear, and survived. The journey had tested her limits, but it had also shown her the power of perseverance, courage, and love for the life she carried. Each step forward was a reminder that she could endure, that she could overcome, and that hope could shine even in the darkest of winters. By the time she reached her cabin, Clara felt a profound sense of relief and gratitude. She had returned stronger, wiser, and more resilient. The cabin, once a place of isolation, now seemed welcoming. She unpacked her belongings and looked around, appreciating every small detail she had once taken for granted. She thought about the journey, the struggles, and the moments of fear, and she knew that she had survived something extraordinary. She whispered softly to her baby, feeling a gentle kick in response. "We made it," she said, tears of relief and joy in her eyes. "We are safe now." In the quiet of the evening, Clara sat by the fireplace, reflecting on her incredible journey. She had faced the wilderness alone, endured unimaginable hardships, and emerged stronger. The experience had taught her about courage, perseverance, and the unexpected kindness of others. She realized that even in the most desperate situations, hope and determination could carry a person forward. And as she felt her baby stir, she knew that together they had survived something extraordinary, a story of resilience, bravery, and unwavering love.